All right, now let's head straight to markets. We have Will Ibong with the details. Great to have you.
Good afternoon, laddie.
Will, good afternoon. And so we have it. We know the bank now that's trying to buy the National Bank of Kenya.
Yes, Access Bank. That's it's one of the great strides they've been, they continued. You've seen them in other markets. You've seen them in Congo, Rwanda, Tanzania. I think they're just, expanding. This expansion plan of theirs is really phenomenal. And, trying to acquire the National Bank of Kenya, that's a big one. It's a huge one. And then we just want to know how that would impact shareholders in Nigeria. We're going to benefit from that, or is it just for the markets there? I know they're probably targeting the AFCFTA, because, Kenya is like a gateway to that trade, in terms of trade corridors. Kenya is one strategic point. So getting into Kenya, I think that is a very good one for the bank.
So you can, do your business, into
and then you provide, the solutions, financial solutions to all transactions. Very, very key and strategic.
Well, keep gauging the move.
Bank. So we just continue with the markets. We begin with Africa, where, as usual, sentiments were mostly positive at intraday. At the time we checked Nigeria's NGX, that's at midday West African time. It was dipping. It dipped actually 0.04%. But news coming in says it's flipped to a positive territory. We're going to have that with our analysts. But let's look at South Africa's GSE at intraday. It was up 0.77%. Still in the green, very good. Elsewhere, let's see Egypt's EGX30. It was also up at intraday, 1.5%. And Kenya closed Wednesday's session 2.49% in the green. Now, it's above the 103 points. The Nairobi Securities Exchange has seen a turnaround. It has delivered nearly 30% returns for dollar investors since the beginning of the year. And now, since the Eurobond buyback in February 2024, that's this year, the shilling has been appreciating and has boosted investors' confidence. Let's check out now activities at the NGX. What's driving sentiments? What's caused the flip from red to green? We're going to be talking to Azizat Awonuga. She's the equities analyst at Party and Securities. Good afternoon, Azizat. It's good to have you on the program.
Hi, good afternoon, Will.
Azizat, as we were speaking earlier, you said that the stocks, equities, NGX is back in the green. So what's driving the sentiment? This is the first green this week, at intraday. So I just want to know what's happening and if we're going to close in the green, but just tell me the stocks investors have decided to buy.
Okay, so midday, we saw that the market was actually down, but then as, time proceeded, we saw gains on the banking end. Access Bank, it was up 1.1% as at midday, as at now it's up about 3.3%. Same with GTCO, it was 1.4%, midday, and now it's up 2.6%. Even interestingly, First Bank, that was even on full offer yesterday. Today, it was about minus 6.3% at midday, and now we're seeing that it's still low, but then it gained a bit, and now it's at minus 4.2. So we really see traction in the banking stocks. Also, Transcore, it was up at midday around 6.6%, and now it's about 9.2%, percent up. So that has really driven the market, and now the market is gaining about 0.21%, and hopefully it closes on the on this positive trajectory.
Signs of that yesterday, because we did have 28 stocks gaining to close market against 22 losers. So this positive sentiment coming back into the market is probably no surprise to see that, the market in terms of market breadth, it wasn't so negative. The correction is there, but we're still having that ping pong movement, that flip back and forth from red to green. But right now we're going to the green, which is a good thing. But let's just see the bank that, I don't know how Access Bank is doing at intraday. Could you just give me the numbers if it's positive, because we've seen that it's set to acquire the National Bank of Kenya?
So Access Bank currently it's at 23.70. It's positive, but we're not seeing the market fully translate the importance of this news. So we are not seeing investors really. I mean, let's see tomorrow. Let's see how it goes. But right now, we feel like the market hasn't fully digested the news, or the sentiments aren't, as you said, it's been bearish. So let's see what investors do. But I mean, Access Bank, it's a very innovative bank. It's a good bank, and it is currently even undervalued at its current price, right? Their deal or pact to acquire the National Bank of Kenya is a very good one. This is the second bank they're acquiring in Kenya. after they acquired Transnational Bank in 2019. And we really expect a lot, not a lot, but then we expect to see what the new CEO of Access Holdings has in store for investors and, stakeholders alike. So, I mean, they tried acquiring a bank last year and that didn't go through. So now that this deal has been, signed and now just waiting on the central banks of Nigeria and Kenya to do due diligence and approvals, we hope that the market really absorbs this and Access Bank shareholders really get value for the innovation that's going on in the bank and the expansion.
Do you really think that this, the benefits would trickle down to investors in Nigeria, the stakeholders here in Nigeria, or is it just going to be focused to the stakeholders that are in the bank, where the bank is domiciled or HQ'd?
So Access Bank is under Access Holdings, which is listed in Nigeria. So hopefully the good results or doing well of Access Bank Kenya is going to impact on the Nigerian market because we have Access Holdings, which is the parent company of the Access Bank Kenya. So investors might actually see a positive, move if the incorporation goes very well.
Okay, fantastic here. But speaking of incorporation, yeah, we know that Access Bank is trying to position itself, target, the Kenya East African market here. Is there going to be like some sort of collaboration with other banks to be able to open up the gateway because of this African free trade area that is, ongoing, to make sure that banks in Nigeria collaborate with Access Bank to be able to provide, financial solutions for trade and other financial transactions that's going to take place? Is there something like that in the offing, or is it just Access Bank moving in and trying to maybe not carrying other banks along? Do you see other banks moving in that direction? That's what I'm trying to find out.
I think every bank has its own strategy, its own expansion strategy, and its own, growth strategy. Access Bank has a vision of being the gateway of Africa to the world, right? So in order to be able to achieve this, they have to have presence in key economic markets across the continent. I do not know if it is in their plans to want to do this alongside other banks, but what I hope for, or what we're hopeful for, is that when opportunities to collaborate arise, the bank takes it on, as it will not just be good to its stakeholders or its shareholders, but even to the economy as a whole, African economy in this case, as with the free trade agreements.
Thank you so much, Azizat Awonuga, equities analyst at Parthian Securities Limited, for sharing your insights on business incorporation.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we move on to the Middle East now, where most major equities in the Gulf traded mostly positive at intraday. Now, news coming in, the UAE Central Bank has decided to keep rates unchanged. Now, you know that UAE currency is pegged to the dollar and tends to mimic the actions of the U.S. Fed, because we know the U.S. Fed yesterday held rates, and so we see the Central Bank of the UAE also holding rates today. Now, the Abu Dhabi Securities Exchange also announced the listing of fixed income ETF, which is the Chimera JP Morgan UAE Bonds Estes Traded Fund. It will be the first ETF to be listed in the UAE and will provide global investors access to a diversified portfolio of UAE bonds with low investment requirements. Now, let's see how the Abu Dhabi index did at intraday. It was up 0.18% to close at 9,286 points. However, Dubai's index was down at intraday 0.25%. We also see Saudi and the Qatari indexes trading in positive territory, 0.79% and 0.08%. Now, let's look at the U.S. and see how that performed. Early trade on today, we see that it's climbed after three major averages closed at new records, and the Federal Reserve concluded its policy meeting and held rates. Futures tied to the Dow Jones was up 0.24%. We see S&P 500 futures also up 0.34%, and the Nasdaq futures was up 0.68%. Now, these moves follow a winning day on Wall Street that sent the major averages to new closing highs. Now, those gains also come, as I mentioned, reiterating the expectations of the Fed for the three 3 cuts for the interest rates this year, which probably will start in June. Now, jobless claims data is something traders are also watching and digesting, as well as existing home sales conditions. Now, let's look at Asia now, see how stocks performed. Japan stocks closed at fresh all-time highs on Thursday as Asia markets climbed after the Federal Reserve maintained its forecast for 3 cuts this year. Now, while holding rates at yesterday's meeting, now Nikkei up 2.03%, Kospi in South Korea also up 2.41%, and the Hang Index in China was also up 1.93%. Now let's look at Shanghai Index and see how that performed. It also closed in positive territory. We see the Shanghai Index also up at, well, the Shanghai dropped at the close of trade, unfortunately. That was what I was trying to find out, 0.08%, and the S&P ASX 200 was up at the close of trade. Ladi, this is just what we're seeing for Asia now. Shanghai and the Hang Seng Tech Index just kind of like move in opposite directions. Sometimes we tend to see them, you know, not following the same pattern and trend. Right. So you want us to look at that market and see what's really pushing it. So for the Australia's index, we see that the bank, you know, remember that the bank left rates unchanged. So we're seeing that impact, and the composite index that it did say that the purchasing managers index did move up in that
right.
That country. So we're seeing that.
And taking you back to the U.S., you know, at this time, 3 rate cuts. That's what the Fed is
promised. Yes, is
promising. You know, I'm sure investors were quite excited about that because they cannot wait to get their rate cut.
They were. You see that impact on the equities markets was really very, very obvious. You know, that knee-jerk reaction. It was just very quickly. You saw investors jumping at it and saying, yes, we're waiting for that. And I believe we have the Bank of England decision. I think that's out. You know, at this time, we're going to be finding out from Juliana in a little bit. Yes. To find out what happened. And how the markets to hold rates,
but we'll see. In the UK.
Yes, they're expected to hold rates. We'll see how that will happen. Exactly. So we don't even know what is going to happen because people are talking about the inflation rate that has dropped, but not necessarily mean that inflation has dropped. It just means that the rate of inflation in the UK is just accelerating at a slower pace. It's rising at a much slower pace than before. So it doesn't necessarily translate to more money in the pockets of the UK citizens. It just means that inflation is just going at a slower pace. It's cooling, but not the impact is not well felt at the moment. So Juliana probably come in and tell us what's happening there.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Will, for the update. All right, talking about the